Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. I am Shawnta Jackson, and my vision in life is to help people to help themselves and others. And my purpose is, to just live and just be me and be grateful and be graceful while I'm doing it. And it's today is kind of bittersweet for me. For the past year, every Saturday, I've streamed live and I've brought on various guests with lived experiences, guests who inspire and inform us and provide resources. And I need a break. That's just it. I need a break. I will continue with my Wednesday show, Connections with Shawnta Jackson, and Connections. The purpose of Connections is for us as professionals to make the most out of networking, career advancement, career growth, business growth via unscripted live chats with like-minded individuals who inform and inspire. So we'll continue that on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And I just really appreciate you all. I appreciate you all checking in. I have constant viewers, and I really appreciate your participation and everything. What's going on in the United States of America right now? We have Juneteenth. Is officially a federal holiday. I don't know how I know how I feel about it, but I'm still processing. It's good. It's good to commemorate our ancestors, but the fight for freedom still continues, and the fact that this is these Freedom Day celebrations, they have gone on in the Americas, for a while, but the fact that these slaves were emancipated, and 2.5 years later they found out about it, and then even after that, for years to follow, there still was illegal slavery. So it's good that we have this federal holiday, and it's nice for the acknowledgement. But like I said, the fight for freedom, it continues. So I just don't want us to just think that, because we have these nice holidays, that everything is okay and everything is all well. It still continues. And I appreciate you all for having these discussions, and for all of our leaders in the field of justice, in the legal system, social justice, criminal justice. Thank you so much. And so my guest is Chris Gonzalez. Chris is a Marine Corps veteran, and he is the associate producer of this documentary, this film called Bastards Road. And Bastards Road is this Marine veteran. He decides to walk the United States and to visit his brothers. So he's walking, I believe it's about 6,000 miles, and he's sharing his experience in combat, his traumatic experiences, how he's healing and suffering, and he meets his brothers across the country, and they share their stories. So it's very emotional. I was watching it this morning, and I had to pause because I started crying, and I was telling Chris about that. But at this time, I'll bring on Chris. He can tell us more about Bastards Roads. He can talk, and really, the point of today's show is to talk about the wounds of war for our soldiers during combat, and then even after combat, and how some of our soldiers are healing, and for those who are not in the healing journey or the healing process, how they can, and then how we as civilians, how can we support our veterans, and how can we support those our Gold Star families as well. So at this time, I'll bring on Chris Gonzalez. Thank you. Hey, Chris, how are you today?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm doing well.
Thank you for joining. So based off of my introduction, what do you think? What do you think about today's topic, and just my interest in the wounds of war, during combat, and then even after?
Sure. Well, first, I thought you did a great introduction, and those are all topics I'd love to talk about. But I'll say that I do believe that for the non-veteran crowd, there's a lot of commonalities that I find with different subgroups. So I think we should talk about some of those subgroups in terms, or some of those commonalities in terms of, the commonalities of veterans versus, people in not so great situations. There are a lot of things that people have in common.
So please.
Well, I think no matter what, each of our social topics are extremely complex topics, right? And I think that many times we become so engulfed in what's wrong, we don't always highlight what's right. You know what I mean? And instead of focusing on what's right, we just it becomes politicized, and then we get people get in arguments on one side or the other side, and we don't move forward. Because what's right, if we can continue to create what's right or recreate what's right, then we can duplicate that and expand our efforts and really multiply our efforts. And what's right to me is it might be right. What's right to someone, what may not be right to someone else. You know what I mean? And so a general approach is never the right thing. So we'll get into it, and I'll tell you, more as we go.
Okay, and so let's talk about the film,
Sure.
Bastard's Road. You are the associate producer. Could you maybe give us a synopsis about the film and tell us how you even got involved?
Sure. I'll start with how I got involved, because that kind of gives me a segue into the film itself. So I think in 2017, 2018, through a mutual friend, I was connected with the director named Brian Morrison. Myself, I'm an Arundel High School graduate from Gambrills, Maryland. He is also, though he's a few years younger than me, he's closer to my sister's age. And the main character is also an Arundel High graduate. So we shared that commonality. And so a mutual friend connected us, and he said, I've got all this footage. And he told me about the story. And I said, I'm very interested in this story. And the story really is a Marine who went to a place called Ramadi in Iraq, which was extremely dangerous. And there was a lot of complications with some of the things that he went through and his battalion went through. He came back. He also did several other tours as an interrogator with the Marine Corps, and then he transitioned out to civilian life. And he kept on trying to find his way and trying to find his calling. And he didn't. And unfortunately, he kind of went into some not so great situations. He kind of went into some alcohol abuse. And what I think is people in general, including John, the main character, tried to substitute a support system with substances. Again, I'll find some kind of commonalities with a broader audience there. But he finally got to a place where he was like, I've got to make a change. And so he had to make that change. He had to look himself in the mirror and realize that something had to change for him to get back on track. And so for him, that change was literally walking across the country. So that's a pretty massive change. And he'll talk about in the movie how it didn't start as this noble thing that he was going to do to inspire everyone. He just kind of started to find himself. But as you said, he walked across the country. He rediscovered that support system. He talks about, why it kind of left in the first place, or why he didn't feel worthy of contacting his friends in the first place. And then, it shows him coming together with these guys. It shows them sharing stories and crying together. It also shows them bringing in some of the family members, which I'm a big fan of, with wives and parents and all that stuff. And then I won't give away the ending, but the ending is a very positive one. And I think is a broader message in terms of we have to be the ones that help each other solve our problems. There's no canned approach. There's no government approach. I don't even think many times there's a straightforward approach from nonprofits. It really is being there for people where you share commonalities. And for him, it was his Marine Corps brothers. And then he expanded it, as you see at the end, to a broader Marine Corps family. And it's a pretty inspiring story. But when I met Brian, he told me he had all this footage, right? And he was kind of describing what he had. And he didn't really have the narrative crafted yet in terms of, the spin on what he'd like. And where I became involved and where I became extremely interested is I feel like there's a lot of doom and gloom out there in cinema, whether it be with, movies with actors or with documentaries that show a lot of the problem, and it continues to harp on the problem, and it makes it look like combat veterans, especially, we'll talk about the difference between veterans and combat veterans. But it makes it combat veterans look extremely, extremely broken. And there may be some complications with certain people, maybe not with everyone. But it also, I think, shows us as victims. And I don't believe that that's true. I think, again, we can solve our own problems. So I think the narrative there was more looking at the solution and the support system and the importance of that support system and the importance of veterans getting out of their bubbles and reconnecting with their brothers and sisters and making sure that their support system is strong, and then bringing those other non-veteran, players in there and expanding that family. You know what I mean?
Yes. And so when reaching out to that support system, John and just others, and I can actually relate and understand how anyone, even if it's so let's talk about individuals who are non-military.
Sure.
You graduate from high school and people move on with their lives, and everyone's at a certain point, and so now there's the reunion, right? And so now you have the business owner or the person who was married with children, and everyone has it, and sometimes individuals can feel like, you know what, I haven't succeeded. I'm embarrassed, so I don't want them to know where I'm at right now in life. And so I could relate to that. And you were saying, we were talking about how we all have commonalities,
sure,
even though the experiences are, different, but just the commonalities. And that's something that I saw in the film.
Sure.
I don't want to be a burden, or I'm embarrassed, or I just don't even know how to process these feelings myself.
You're exactly right. And in fact, most of my work isn't always with veterans. Most of my work is in public health, especially in substance abuse and behavioral health and mental health. And so honestly, people in bad, in situations, especially when it comes to dealing with a mental health issue or dealing with substance abuse issues, a lot of time they're the exact same way. It's almost hidden from their loved ones because they're ashamed because they have this disorder. And I won't go on my tangent about post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm 100% okay with post-traumatic stress. I'm not good with the term disorder. I'm not a big fan of that.
Okay. And rightfully so, I understand. Just terms, disorder, illness. Just some of those labels can create stigma. And then,
Exactly.
we're all human, and we have different emotions and feelings and the way how we process that. So if anything, it's to me, it's about understanding, understanding of self, that level of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, but also that understanding and empathy for other humans.
Of course. But I do think that there's elements of social media that have probably made it worse. And I think John kind of alludes to that in the beginning of the film, where he said, I go on Facebook or whatever, and he sees all of his friends who are now married with kids. And, on social media, your best foot is, and you sometimes create this facade of, oh, look how great I'm doing. When in actuality, you may not be. But everyone wants to show that they're doing well on social media, and, posting pictures of someone with their spouse and their kids and doing well and being happy. I think that for those who, that kind of presents more of a wall than people understand. And, that wall continues to build. And then the people who aren't doing so well, or the people who aren't feeling so successful with themselves, withdraw a bit more and more. And then again, that leads to not so positive behaviors.
Yes. I try to, especially tomorrow is Father's Day, on Mother's Day, those type of holidays. I can understand how people, not everyone has a healthy relationship with their father.
Sure.
Not everyone has a father, or some people lost their father, or, everyone has different situations, or someone's a father and they're not able to see their children, different things like that. And so I can understand how social media can definitely make it worse. Make you feel bad about yourself. But like you said, a lot of people, they are putting up this facade of, my life is happy, and happy Father's Day to my father, that they probably don't necessarily have a healthy relationship with either. So
right, exactly, and I don't think it's ever, well, not always, but usually I don't think it's done with the intent to make other people feel bad. I think it's just the intent to share it. That's why it's one of the reasons why I like social media, is because I can see people who I grew up with in their families, people I was in the service with in their family. I find that to be very fun. But again, I do feel like that can create that wall for people. And again, that's where I find those commonalities, where it's just same example that you just gave with Father's Day. Everyone's putting up their stuff. Look at me, I'm so happy. And then people without, in those situations where they're maybe wanting their father, or wanting a strong male presence, or a strong male mentor. I really feel not so good about that.
Right. Yeah. And so I'll pause really quick and check in the audience. We have a few people watching. And so during my introduction, before I brought you on, well, we had a check-in from In Your Ear Radio, Latoya Watry, and my cousin in Las Vegas. She says, good morning and good afternoon. And then we have Yasmin Marsh is watching from Baltimore City.
Hey.
And Latoya, she says, when I said about Juneteenth and how I was kind of processing it,
Sure.
Latoya's response is, I'm happy about it. Our ancestors' plight is American history, and the truth shall set the misled and the miseducated people free. And I 100% agree with her, and I appreciate you, Latoya. Thank you so much. Yes, and so you mentioned that there's a difference between there's combat veterans and then there's veterans, and then just recently you learned a new veteran status as far as time. So I automatically thought that a veteran was someone who served past tense in the military, but that's not necessarily the case. But so just could you please start off with telling us the differences between the subgroups of veterans, and well, just start off with the differences.
Sure. Well, it's important to, so first let me share my bias in the very beginning. I'm obviously very biased towards the Marine Corps. My expertise is in the Marine Corps. I've been a Marine now for 17 years. I'm still in the Marine Corps Reserves, and I enjoy it very much. In fact, I'll talk a little bit more about reserves later, but I'll stay on topic now. But I do see, as I talk to other veterans and as I do work in the veteran community, that different components have different issues in terms of the Marine Corps does their thing. And, they were, for the last almost 20 years, have been involved in combat operations. Maybe not so much in the last few years. But for a long time, we're in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan. The Army is the exact same way. And then when you get to the Navy, you have a variety. Some people have gone to combat situations. Some people haven't. Same thing with the Air Force. Some people have been in combat situations. Some people haven't. There's also other, conflicts across the country where you send smaller teams and everything like that. And then you have the special operations community. But I do think that the term veterans is used very generically, and it's not. There's people who have served in different eras, and unfortunately, the World War II and Korean veterans, there aren't so many that are living anymore, because that era is very old. No offense to anyone if they're listening. Then you had a period in between, and then you had the Vietnam era veterans. And I'll say that, as I look at the issues, the Vietnam era veterans got a really bad really rough time coming back. There was a lot of social issues going on that they weren't planning for. They had no control over. And the Department of Veterans Affairs is not what it is now. They have made a lot of improvements. But I think Vietnam era veterans have their own issues. And now as that era starts to reach their retirement age, I'm curious to see how that plays out, because there are complications with people who retire. And so then you have the eras in between, and then you have the Gulf War veterans and, unique things with them, though, I wouldn't have called that a massive conflict, but there are some complications with going to combat there. And then you have the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans and some different complications there with things like burn pits, with the different kinds of combat with Iraq and Afghanistan. And, unfortunately, I do see being in combat as something that is really a big issue. I'm not for it or against it. I stand in the middle of that, of my judgment. But I do know that there are things with the combat veterans in terms of, I'll give you an example. Number one, for me personally, there's going to be no high that's ever as exciting as being in combat. It's an extreme high. It's extreme amounts of adrenaline and, all kinds of stuff. And it's a pretty cool feeling, but, similar to drugs, with extreme highs, there are what? Extreme lows. And so people face that. And so many people who have done several combat tours, as they start to transition out of the military, they're going to find it's going to be difficult for many of those people to find something that makes them feel worthy as they were then. And there's also people who have lost those who have close to them, and things like survivor's guilt. And I won't go over all the issues with the combat veteran community, but they are unique to the people who have been in combat situations. And then with the greater veteran community, they may not have some of that combat stress, but for whatever situation that they're in, people transition out for different reasons. And some of those reasons are they're very happy with the transition, and some of those reasons are, they're not very happy with the transition out, but they made it for complications or, because of life decisions or whatever. So then there are a unique set of circumstances with the transition from the transition from the military to civilian life. And so, all of those things are different, but we're all labeled under this one umbrella of veterans.
And then the other status of veteran, what classifies you? Like, how do you receive that status? Is it because I did serve once, or can I still serve and be a veteran?
So I'm still considered a veteran. I do believe that if you served an initial contract, I believe that's a 4-year contract. I do believe that after that, you are considered a veteran. And I don't know what perks there are, but I do know with the Veterans Department of Veterans Affairs, that's a thing. And so the example there is using home loans with Department of Veterans Affairs. They actually give very good home loan interest rates and guarantee the loans that way. And so I believe you're eligible after that first contract to be labeled as a veteran and get those benefits. So there are benefits there from the government side.
Okay. And we have a comment. We have a comment from Gina. Gina is checking in from Oakland. And Gina says, thanks for your service, Chris, and thanks for giving civilians a different insight into the lives of veterans returning home from tours. There's definitely a disconnect and typically a stigma that many returning veterans issues only stem from PTSD and similar factors.
Right.
And but going back to the movie Bastards Roads, and by the way, everyone, you can go online. The website is bastardsroads.com, bastards, plural, road.com. And you can stream it from, I think it's YouTube, Google Play, iTunes, and it's one more. But I downloaded it. I think I paid $4.99 today to watch it, and I have access to it for a few weeks. And I couldn't, like I was telling you earlier, I had to take a break, and I got really heavy, and I started crying. I became sad, and I was just at a funeral yesterday too. So I think it's probably a mix of different things. I was just in St. Louis. I got back this morning, and so tomorrow's Father's Day, but I was able to spend time with my father. And I think it's just a mix, like, oh, I wish I could have probably stayed another day. And then I'm here, but I'm sleepy because of this trip. And then I watched this film just because I felt like I had to. I would not have felt comfortable interviewing you if I hadn't watched at least the majority or half of it. It's been on my list, but I'm like, I have to watch it right now before the show.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, but like I said, it was emotional for me because I was just thinking. So I believe it was John, the main character in the film. He was talking about, it was him. The dehumanization. How when you're in combat, you can't think of these are families, these are individuals. In order to, you're fighting. And so with him and his situation, he had just finished boot camp, and then September 11th happened, 9/11. And so all of a sudden he's deployed and he's fighting. And he's never had any combat, and even him and his brothers, they never had any combat experience. They just graduated boot camp, and then as far as and help me out here, I'm a civilian, but as far as like the normal infrastructure, supplies, and resources, as far as the aircraft and the tanks and the things that ideally someone would have in combat, those weren't available to them. So from my understanding, this was on the ground, and it was even playing field. There's the U.S. has. These are the weapons that the U.S. has, and then the enemy, the people that they're fighting, these are the weapons that they have, and they're pretty much similar. So they're like going in toe to toe. But in the meantime, they're in the middle. It's not a field. It's in a city. It's a populated area. So there's women and children, and the U.S. soldiers. And the reason why I'm saying this is so that people can kind of get an idea. And I was relating to him, and I could understand where he was, and I can imagine it as well. He's like, we're in uniform. We know who each other are.
Right.
They're not in uniform. They're not in uniform, and there are civilians in the area as well, and including children. And he was telling the story of how he threw a grenade, and it was a young boy there. And so that messed up his, like that's a memory that he had. And that was just one of the memories that was kind of like haunting him. But he also mentioned that dehumanization part. And like you said, you mentioned like there's a high, but then, and he probably had the high and the dehumanization and the military, the fight or flight mindset until the human boy was there, the little child,
As you get farther into the film, he'll also talk more deeply about losing some people he was very close with as well. And so that also adds that extra complication. But you're very right. And I'll explain a little bit about my roles in both Iraq and Afghanistan and how I've come to really view everything, because Marines, the ultimate honor really is going to combat for Marines. And I know we may be wired a bit differently than most people. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's the way it is. Most Marines join because of a noble cause, and some join for, there's a variety of causes, but many join with the understanding that if something happens, you're going to be there. Even if you're not an infantry person, you're going to be somewhere there. But many times when you start to look at all these things, it's always good guys versus bad guys. And in the past, we've had, World War II is like the most, there's so many movies that have been made about World War II. It was usually the Germans or the Japanese versus the Americans, and everyone's uniformed, right? As we started getting towards modern wars, Vietnam would be a good one, there weren't uniforms, right? Everyone looked like the regular people. And so they blended in, and they also, that's the exact same way that the Americans beat the British in the Revolutionary War. And so they blended in. And so that added several layers of complications, because most, Marines don't want to kill anyone innocent. They want to kill who's labeled as bad guys. But the term bad guys is very subjective. So when I was in Iraq, it was 2003. I was in a similar role to John. I was an infantryman. I was with a light armored reconnaissance battalion. So instead of being on foot, we're in these vehicles that were kind of like mini tanks. And we would go, we'd be a little bit faster and be able to go to places quicker. But it was a combat related role. And then it became kind of a peacekeeping type role. Fast forward some years, and I got out of the Marine Corps and I got back in 2010, and I went to Afghanistan, a role where my job was to be out there with the infantry, but my job was really to look at stability. And that means looking at the leaders within the community, the local government and how they relate to those leaders in the local community. It means looking at things like education and public health and economic development and all of that. And then as you do that, as I did that at least, I started to see more of this gray area of good guy, bad guy. For instance, the Taliban, right? The Americans were fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. But the Taliban would come, let's say from Pakistan, their main headquarters, come down to where we were and say, I'm going to kill your family if you don't put a bomb in the ground. And so what's the poor shepherd? What's his choice? You know what I mean? And so that, as troops, we would consider that person a bad guy. But in reality, is he really a bad guy? Or is he just a person really stuck in a terrible situation? You know what I mean? I will be honest that I think there's a lot of commonalities between that relationship and police in several neighborhoods, to where sometimes the lack of relationships and the lack of understanding of one another contributes to what sometimes seems to be the good guy, bad guy dynamic, and people not understanding the gray areas.
Thank you for that. And anyone, do you have any comments or questions based off of what Chris just said? If so, please do let us know. And Chris, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
Let's see. I joined way back in 1999. When I graduated high school, I had several good friends that went to the Marine Corps. And I was joking with a friend of mine on a different podcast, but I was a bigger guy back in high school. I played offensive and defensive tackles. So I was not as into fitness as I am now, or as I was when I joined, the Marine Corps, went to boot camp. So it really wasn't in the shape needed to go to Marine Corps boot camp. So I did some construction for a while, and then I went to college for a while. I do have a family history of people who joined the Marines and the Army. And then one spring break, I just decided I wanted a challenge. And so I went to Marine Corps boot camp one summer and then reported to a reserve unit 1 week in a month and didn't miss any school. And then the next summer I went to my School of Infantry and did that commitment and became more formally trained. Then again, continued my 1 week in a month all the way until 2003, until we got deployed.
Okay. And so you now own your own business.
Mm-hmm.
You have a veteran-owned business. And how did that come about? And I assume, since you said that you've had the opportunity to work with different governments,
sure,
that and you were looking at a stability, and so I assume is that what you consult on?
So I've worked with the government of Panama and in the area where Panama and Colombia are bordered. and I helped a lot of the police do stakeholder engagement there. And so there, a narco-terrorist group named the FARC, F-A-R-C, they did a lot of human trafficking and drug trafficking and had a lot of deep relationships within the community. So I worked with the police there to develop those same relationships. In Afghanistan, it was kind of the same way in terms of stakeholder engagement, right? And looking to engage different groups and see, if this happens, if we introduce this into the environment, how will the different groups react? So a lot of times that's what we do for organizations is we try to help them develop a plan for what they're trying to do and then figure out what they're going to do into different subsections and how to do that. And then what's the data that's going to tell the story of success or failure or anywhere in between.
Okay. And then you are also on the board of directors. I believe it's two nonprofit organizations, one being Mentoring Mentors. And what's the other?
Healthcare Access Maryland is the other one. Okay.
And tell me about Healthcare Access Maryland and your contribution or your value to that board.
Sure. Healthcare Access Maryland does a lot of, their main function and why they were formed was helping people have access to healthcare. And that's people in several different situations, but without an HR department, without a formal person to walk you through healthcare and benefits, it can be extremely confusing, frustrating, expensive, all of those things. And many people, as things have changed with President Bush to President Obama and so forth and so on, it's become even more confusing in terms of what different groups have access to. Especially those who are a 1099 employee or part-time employee, or, unemployed or something like that. And so Healthcare Access main function was helping people get access to healthcare. Since then, they've expanded a lot of their programs to making sure, new mothers have the equipment that they need and the services they need to raise their children and to be born in a healthy environment. We've done a lot of work with people transitioning from prison to the civilian side and, the regular Baltimore community and Maryland community, though I think our heart's in Baltimore. But we are in several counties in Maryland and helping to reintegrate them and also with access to care and access to other services as well, social services as well. And so my role on the board of directors there really was to help connect resources. So I tried to bring in friends of mine that were other business owners, other just good people in general that I've, in the Baltimore and throughout Maryland. And then also anytime I saw something on the federal government side or a little bit on the state side, I would tell their CEO, hey, you should be thinking about this.
Okay. And you also, as I mentioned, you are on the board of directors for Mentoring Mentors. And I've served as a guest speaker, as a volunteer guest speaker for the boys and for the girls.
Oh, great.
Yes, an individual donor. Actually, I'm going to stand up and pull something that I have on my wall. One second. Okay. And so I have these on my wall. And I believe, I don't know, and I got a little phone call and I was telling Alfonso Mayo, the founder and executive director, I was like, these mean a lot. This means a lot for you all to call. Yeah. And then I get these little thank you, the little cards. And it makes me actually say, you know what, this is an organization that I want to continue to support. Alfonso, he served as a guest on this show, and Great. Our topic was actually domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And some of the mentees that were watching as well, and he shared his story as a victim and as a perpetrator of domestic violence, whether it was intentional or not. And then I can't. She's going to kill me. I feel bad. I can't think of her name right now. I see her face. But the young lady who's also one of the founding members.
Rachel Lewis.
Yeah, Rachel Lewis. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I couldn't think of Rachel's name. But Rachel also served as a guest as well on the show. And so I've decided that even though I am taking a break with this Saturday show, I'll continue my Wednesday show, Connections with Shawnta Jackson, professional networking, career advancement growth, business growth. And I've chosen to, for any proceeds that I receive from corporate sponsorship, to adopt Mentoring Mentors as the organization that would be the recipient of, my adopted nonprofit that I support.
That would be great. We really appreciate it. Honestly, I've known Mayo now, for the listeners, his name is Alfonso Mayo, though I don't think I've ever called him Alfonso. It's just Mayo. It's how everybody knows him. Man, I've known him since I think 2013, and we coached football together at Glen Burnie High School. Won't go into that because we really did not have a great record. It was a very, very bad losing record. But man, it connected me with him, and there were some other good people who I still talk to from that coaching staff as well. But him and I reconnected via social media, which is one of the reasons why I love it, or like it, I should say. But LinkedIn is one that I like a lot, and that's how we reconnected. It's because I put up stuff up regularly. He does too. We decided to reconnect, I think in 2016 or 17. And he said, "Hey, would you mind teaching a class for some of my students about business and just sharing everything you know about business?" I said, "Sure." And from then, I think he had just gotten his 501c3. And it really started crafting his intergenerational near-to-peer approach, which I think is far better than any mentoring organization out there. No offense to anyone.
So pause. Please explain that. Please explain the intergenerational peer approach.
Sure. Again, no offense to any other mentoring organization, but most of the time it's adults to kids. It's adults mentoring kids and trying to form relationships with them and show them, here's what I did to be successful, and so forth and so on. Usually that happens, let's say, once a month or twice a month. And I can't take credit for this. Mayo was the one that brought up, if you're trying to get in shape, working out twice a month is not going to cut it, right? And so really our approach to mentoring is getting the adults out of the way and letting some of the older kids, we first had to form a nucleus of students, both males and females, and really make them feel welcome, make them feel valued, make them feel like they're part of a true family, whether it's apart from their extended family. And we realized that starting that in high school is really not where it's at. Many times people have made several decisions in high school, so we went all the way, to the 5th and 6th grade. And so the goal there is to have people come through, and then once they go to high school, they become junior mentors to those who are just coming up in middle school. And they have shared experiences. They have shared commonalities. Many of them are facing similar challenges. And so we do have adults that kind of are there for resources and, help to guide things when we do, skill development in school or, tutoring, and we've kind of matured our program. But bottom line is we get the adults out of the way and let the students work with each other. And that helps to create buy-in from the older students. It helps to create strong mentors, that the younger students can look up to. It helps to create that support system. I refer to that support system several times because it's real. And it creates that support system. And as we start to develop that strong support system and confidence, then we add other stuff in like skill development, career development, and looking to develop different career tracks and everything. So we put them on a sustainable path to success. And they don't need us anymore, but they come back because they want to. And they mentor other people because they want to, because they know that that's what the solution is to continue strong, positive things and try to get away from some of those negative ones.
Yep. So the long-term outcome would be or the impact would be the sustainability and the creation of a pipeline of mentors that are actually an alumni that will go back and mentor and keep training the youth, and it'll be a cycle. So we have that sustainability there with mentoring mentors. So thank you for that. I want to respect your time. I do have some closing questions, but before I do, we have Mrs. Zavala. She's checking in, and she says she's in Las Vegas. My friend Melissa from high school, and Chris, as you're speaking, so we're the same age. Melissa and I were class of 1999, Valley High School.
Nice.
In Las Vegas. And she says, thank you for your services and knowledge. And then we have my friend Peggy Franks checking in from Chicago. And Peggy and I met in college. Nice. Undergrad. I was 19, and I believe Peggy might have been 40. So she was the oldest student in the class. And then, so this is like 1999, 2000, sure. It was 2000, early 2000. And
where was that?
In Chicago.
No, you went to college in Chicago?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I went to Columbia College, Chicago. It's a private liberal arts school.
Sure.
And I majored in public relations. But I have my master's in public health. And I got my master's at UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so now I'm here.
I don't know if I could have done a lot of schoolwork in University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
You know what?
Right there.
But I wasn't, by this time, I'm divorced with a child.
Oh, okay.
I'm transitioning my life, and I'm going back as I am at that time a mature adult. So right. I wasn't an undergrad at UNLV, right. Trying to find my way. So different experience and different level of discipline and focus. But yeah, Peggy and we met, and I had, she asked me if I was a stripper.
Oh.
And I said, no, I'm a student. Because she was saying that I was because my boots matched my purse and my shoes. And she said, you're so well coordinated. That's how strippers dress, like, because they have money. So, right. Are you a stripper? I was like, no, I'm not a stripper. I'm a student.
That's quite a question.
Yeah, and we have Mayo checking in. He says, my guy.
Hey.
And for the record, I'm according to Alfonso, I'm the only person who calls him Alfonso.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yes. He says something, me shake weight himself.
Mr.
That was an inside joke?
That was an inside joke. It was that podcast that I sent you, a different podcast.
Okay. And I love you too, Peggy. And okay, so let's start to close out. And for everyone who's watching, as I've announced, he said Mr. Shake Weight himself. And so everyone who's watching, I announced it a little bit earlier in the show, but today, this is going to be my last Saturday show for a while. I'm taking a break so that I can focus on my Wednesday show, Connections with Shawnta, and related projects such as in-person events. I plan on having networking events in Baltimore, Chicago, either Atlanta or Dallas, and then of course, Las Vegas. And so that's what we're working on now. So, and plus I haven't had a Saturday in a long time to myself. In a year, I've consistently had guests. And so I have a lot of content. So please do continue to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, share, comment, look at some of those older episodes in the morning. When you're getting dressed, you can listen to them. A lot of really good content. Jimmy, I'm still around. I'm just taking a break. I'm just getting better. I have to improve and step up my game, and so that I can help you all step up your game.
Go enjoy your Saturdays.
Right. My mom's watching. She says, great show, and she's in Las Vegas.
Hi.
And so my closing question, working with the youth at mentoring mentors, sure. And then also with your experience working with the combat community and the veteran community, particularly the combat community, a lot of the youth, they have experienced a lot of traumatic events in their life, and are experiencing and possibly can experience some in the near future, just given where they live, or just the fact that, humans, you just never know.
Mhm.
I mean, we all could experience something traumatic. But with that said, are there any similarities in the way in which you can help, or we civilians, volunteers, neighbors, are there similar ways in which we could help combat veterans, heal, or support them in the healing process? And can we use some of those same strategies with youth?
That's a great question. Honestly, that was the question I was hoping you were going to get to. Because I've said this several times. The reason why I don't like the term disorder in PTSD is, one, it has that negative stigma, negative connotation. But I do believe that many people are facing post-traumatic stress at various levels. And I've said this, whether it's a veteran that served in combat, or someone from the military who served in combat once, twice, several times, a person who's gone through sexual trauma, a person who's even lost a loved one that's very close to them, or a person that experiences growing up in places that are high crime and violence. All of those areas give extreme amounts of stress sometimes. And I do sincerely believe that when post-traumatic stress builds and becomes almost unbearable, that's when your support system is the most important. And that's when the quality of your support system is truly put to the test. And for those that have the right people around them that they can lean on, that they can cry on, that they can, joke around with and goof off with, and kind of, get their mind off, it doesn't matter. But for those that are surrounded by the right resources and the right people, they're able to move forward much easier. And for those that have not developed a support system, or just haven't even been, exposed to one, it is much, much more difficult. And so I think the solution there is to get the heck out. That's the most extreme word I'll use, but get off social media, talk to people, become, now hopefully we're through the COVID situation, or at least starting to come through it. Reconnect with people in real life, get out of your comfort zone, ask them about their experiences, and just shut up and listen to hear them, and not to argue or rebuttal or anything like that. Don't have 2 or 3 or 5 questions in mind. Just ask, like similar to how we've done it, just ask them and listen. And I think when people do that, people become closer and more, more connected, and we can start to form our support systems. We find that we have commonalities and we're not so alone, because I think that's one of the harder times, harder things is people feeling like they're alone. And so, if you're going through bad times, you've got to expand your support system. If you want to become, some, part of someone else's support system, then do it. There's nothing preventing you except for excuses. So get out there, have conversations, become friends with people, get out and experience someone who's done something different than yourself, and support one another, even if they think differently than you. Who cares?
And then I would just like to add to that, for the support system or the supporter, sometimes just, reach out and just to let them know.
Agreed.
So some people have a support system and they're not at that point where they're willing to say, hey, I'm not okay. Or sometimes you can talk to people and you ask them, how's everything? Are you okay? And they're going to say, yeah, I'm fine. I'm okay. But sometimes it's probing a little bit, or understanding that even though they say that they're okay, based off of what you know about that person, to be, just to be present, or just to let them know I am here for you. Or hey, do you want to go and go for a walk or have a drink, or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But for us to let people that we care about, or that we have concern about, to let them know sometimes that, that we are available, even if it's just, hey, I love you, just making sure everything's okay. Call me anytime if you need anything. Or like I said, it could be a simple invite. You never know. I've been in that situation a lot of times where people have invited me to come to places, not even knowing, it was just an invite, a simple, innocent invite, not knowing what happened to me that day or what was going on with me, and not knowing how much it meant for me to be able to get out of the house and enjoy myself, to be with that person. And they never knew. They never knew anything, so, and it's okay. You don't always have to know.
Exactly.
Yes.
Reaching out goes a long way. Being authentic goes a long way as well. Not just liking their silly little photo, but getting out there and really authentically caring about someone else and seeing if they truly are okay. And getting out of your bubble and stop making that, I want to, but I'm so busy. People that say that really do drive me crazy. I'm sure you've met several people that, hey, can you do this, do that? And you're like, oh, I want to so bad, but I'm so busy. For me, that's not an excuse.
Yeah, yes. And I'll close out with some final comments. Mom Melissa says hi, and Melissa, I'm responding for my mom. She says you have her phone number. And Jimmy Denson, he says he's a U.S. Navy pirate veteran here. Desert Shield, Storm, 9/11, Noble Eagle, Iraqi freedom campaigns. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service, Jimmy. I was just
about to say thanks for yours too, Jimmy.
Yeah. And we have Falcon Star Alley. This just made my day. He's checking in from Uganda, East Africa. And I'm not gone on Saturdays. I'm just taking a break. And when I do decide to come back with more self-help and personal development and those stories of triumph and support, it's going to be bigger than what I've done so far. And Latoya, in your ear radio, if you're watching, it's time for you to start back doing your Saturday shows. And your first topic is Jimmy's comment. So Jimmy wants to talk about post-traumatic slave disorder. And so I think that would be a great topic for you. I'm calling her out in your ear radio with Jimmy. He's a huge supporter, but he's definitely he posts these comments a lot, and I think we should definitely talk about it.
Sure.
And so thank you, everyone. Again, I'm Shawnta Jackson, and my vision is to help people to help themselves and others. And you can learn more about me at ShawntaJackson.com. I've revamped my website, and it's focusing more on connections. You can connect with me on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, with 4 Connections with Shawnta Jackson. And it's interviews with like-minded individuals who inform and inspire. And it's all about career growth, career advancement, and business growth. So I'll see you on Wednesdays. And then an in-person event is coming to you soon. So we'll have Connections with Shawnta Jackson, the event series, live in person, coming soon this fall. And everyone, make it a great day. Thank you so much. Thank you for always checking in and watching. I love you, and talk to you later. And thank you so much, Chris, for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.